Everybody, it's great to be with you today. It's Tim, continuing our study through the Bible chapter by chapter and day by day today. I should mention first, by the way, we may be losing power if the lights blink off for a second. That's what's going on in that case. But our reading for today was in Genesis 46, 47, and 48. Now, in chapter 46, you notice that Israel is going to Egypt with his whole family. Everything is loaded up on the wagons from the Egyptians. That's a new invention, by the way, of Egypt at that time, the wagon. They're loaded up. He's coming. All of his family are on the way. They stop in Beersheba uh, to worship God. And I think the reason he does that was just to make sure that God is in this. Is this really your will? You may remember his grandfather Abraham sojourned in Egypt when there was a famine in the land. That was a mistake. And then his father Isaac, I think, was on the way to Egypt, and God said, "No, don't go to Egypt." There was a famine at that time too, and I think he just wanted to make sure that God was a part of this whole process of making the trip, and God confirmed it. Yes, this is my will. Go on to Egypt, survive and prosper there in that land. But then after that, something you may have noticed, and maybe this was a part of the chapter that you read over more quickly than others, but the Bible doesn't just say, okay, Isaac and his whole family went to Egypt, but God names everyone in that family that went with him. And the reason God did that was because families are important. Those future generations are what God cares about. I think we miss sometimes this generational aspect of the gospel that this is what God desires. You remember in Malachi chapter 2, God was telling the exiles that had come back, where they're in Jerusalem, your prayers are not being answered right now. The reason for that is because you've dealt treacherously with the wife of your youth. You're divorcing your wives. Now, Malachi lived at about the same time as Ezra and Nehemiah. And if you know Ezra, you know that book ends that way in Ezra chapter 10, where Ezra gave a command that the Jews who had married non Jewish wives, which was definitely not God's will, should divorce those wives and start the process of that happening. And he leaves it there. Ezra doesn't say what God's response is to that, but I think Malachi is giving us God's response in Malachi chapter 2. He said, I hate divorce. And that tells me, if God hates divorce, I think I should hate divorce as well. I've never advised anyone to get a divorce. And saying that, I do have to mention that because of the times we live in, and we have no fault divorce laws, which I think are the most unjust laws that we have on the books. But yeah, there's sometimes when you have to say to a lady, the first thing you need to do is get yourself to a place of safety, and then maybe down the road when your husband is clean and sober, you can talk about getting back together. And there are people in our churches who have been divorced and remarried, and I would say to them, God's will for you is to be the best husband or wife you can be to the spouse you have right now. But somebody may say, hey, wait a minute, I married the wrong person. So now what am I supposed to do? Well, in Ezra's time, that whole group of people could have said the same thing. Yeah, God specifically said you don't marry pagan wives, and yet they've done it. They marry the wrong people. What can you do in a situation like that? Well, you can do what God commands here. God is concerned about a godly seed, and that's what he says in Malachi chapter 2. That's why God hates divorce so much. He wants that next generation. What you can do is raise your sons and daughters in the nurture and admonition of the Lord to the best of your ability. You may be the only one in your family who is on board with that, but that's what you can do. God cares about that generation, that they do it right, and the generation after that, that they're committed to the Lord. It's something our churches today, I think, have missed in some ways, the generational part of the gospel. God, in His grace, has blessed us with 20 grandchildren, and we have one great grandson now. And, my desire is that when my life is over, that there'd be this small army coming right behind me of sons and daughters and grandchildren and great grandchildren who are taking up the fight for the kingdom of God behind me. And did the best I could as a dad. I'm an old man now, and I know boy, I wish I could have done better. As a dad, what dad doesn't? We do the best we can, and then pray God somehow use what I did for good. But that's what God desires. And I think we miss this in our churches sometimes, in our youth ministry. And if I don't stop myself, I could end up preaching a sermon on that. I will stop myself, but I just want to make one point that the God's view of youth ministry is not to separate the kids from the adults and have fun and games and rock music and pizza. But God's desire for youth ministry is found actually in the end of Malachi. Malachi chapter 4 is to turn the hearts of fathers to their children and the hearts of children to their fathers. That should be our goal in every youth ministry that we have. Well, give that some thought. Feel free to write your angry comments if you want to, but think about it. And tomorrow, as we get together, our reading is going to be in Genesis 48 and 49 and in Exodus chapter 1. So read there. I'll look forward to seeing you then. Have a great day, everybody.